Hey, it's Papa. Just some, I guess, random thoughts about the processes of subduction and rifting that happen as part of the plate tectonics movements on the Earth. I've probably talked about this already in some other videos, but just in case. And I don't think I'm looking at you. Now I'm looking at you, but it's okay. Rifting. No, let's go back. You know that, and I know that the Earth's crust is broken up into gigantic plates that are floating on the mantle. Usually, part of the crust, or one side of these giant plates, is land crust, and the other side is ocean crust. It doesn't always happen that way, but usually you do. For example, the North American plate, and I think I'm right about this, in the east you have ocean crust because the Atlantic mid-ocean ridge is erupting and making new ocean crust. In the west you have land crust, which is the North America and South America too. So that's an example of one of Earth's big tectonic crustal plates that's composed of both ocean crust and land crust. So what can happen with these big crustal plates to cause them to move around? Well, we know that convection currents in the mantle, convection just means heat currents, cause all of the movement of these tectonic plates. Let's say you have a supercontinent where all the land crust on the Earth is congregated into one gigantic continent. And we've had several of those. Pangaea was the last one. The one before that was Rodinia, and we've had at least two, maybe three before those, and I can't remember the name of them. But this giant piece of land crust laying on top of the plasticky molten mantle is like putting the lid on a pot of water that's on the stove. It gets really hot there. And so that extra heat in the mantle causes a mantle plume or a mantle hotspot, which is hundreds, maybe thousands of miles long, and it erupts into all these volcanoes that split the continent apart. And all these volcanoes that erupt along this hotspot, linear hotspot, create ocean crust on each side of the rift or the split, and that widens out the ocean, puts an ocean in between the pieces of the former pieces of the supercontinent. And so those rifts are rifting creates and enlarges oceans. So you have ocean crust, which is mainly basalt lava, but underneath the basalt lava is gabbro pluton, which is mineralogically exactly the same as basalt. It's just unerupted. It's underneath the erupting part of this mid-ocean ridge, and then below that, and mixed in with the basalt and the gabbro, is serpentinite that we've talked about before, because water gets into the mid-ocean ridge and works its way down to the mantle, to the top of the mantle, and reacts with the dunite/peridotite, which is the most abundant rock on planet Earth, and it lives down in the mantle. The mantle is made up of this dunite/peridotite, and that's all mixed in with all the other elements that make up the Earth. Gold is down there. They say there's enough gold down there mixed in with the mantle peridotite/dunite to cover the surface of the Earth about a foot deep, plus or minus. And all the other elements, uranium's down there, lead, iron, titanium, copper, everything, all the valuable elements, silver, that all the valuable elements that we seek for here on the surface. So this hotspot, linear hotspot's creating a rift that rifted a supercontinent apart and put an ocean in between the two broken pieces. The ocean's getting bigger, enlarging, because with all these basaltic volcanic eruptions, they're under the water, of course. It's spitting out ocean crust on each side. It's like an ocean crust factory, and it's pushing out, pushing out, pushing out. Well, on the other side of the ocean, pressure is being built up because there's ocean crust being produced and no space being made for it, until finally ocean crust breaks and a piece of ocean crust subducts down below another piece of ocean crust. Okay, so in that case, you are going to get a volcanic island chain. You've got ocean crust under ocean crust subduction, and you get a volcanic island chain. And the interesting thing about it is the rocks that are produced by this subduction in this volcanic island chain situation, they are intermediate rocks. You will also get felsic rocks and mafic rocks, but mostly you get intermediate rocks. And that's because of fractional melting, and I won't go into that, but the main thing is that your volcanic island chain, ocean crust subducted under ocean crust, produces a lot of diorite magma, a lot of andesite lava. Also, you will get felsic lavas like dacite lava, and you'll get mafic lava. So you get the whole range from felsic to mafic, but mostly you get intermediate rocks. So that's an interesting thing to remember. When you get a ocean crust subducted under ocean crust, you're going to get a lot of intermediate rocks. Also, if you get ocean crust breaking and subducting underneath a rifted hunk of land crust, and that happened during the tectonic mountain building event here in Georgia. Our Piedmont, our Georgia Piedmont, Inner Piedmont, and our Georgia Eastern Blue Ridge geologic provinces were pieces of rodinia that rifted off, hunks, land crust that rifted off away from the continent and moved out into the ocean a little ways and then stopped. Because the main rift was further oceanward or further east than they were. And so then you got a subduction event where ocean crust was subducted beneath these rifted hunks of land crust. In that case, you also get mostly intermediate rocks, although you do get felsic rocks and mafic rocks. So you get mostly diorite, magma, and andesite lava, but you also get felsic, dacite lava, and you get basalt lava too. So you get the whole range, but more in the intermediate range of those rocks. Okay, so those are two situations where you get mostly intermediate rocks along with your felsic and your mafics. Ocean crust subducted under ocean crust, and also then ocean crust subducted under a rifted hunk of land crust. Not the whole continent, but a rifted piece of it, like an underwater island kind of thing. Okay, now let's look at where you have ocean crust breaking and subducting underneath a continent. And this happened when the Pacific Ocean plate broke and subducted underneath the North American plate on the west coast where California is now. In that case, since there was so much land crust that the ocean crust subducted underneath. You got huge amounts of granite produced because the heat from that subduction process just melted the granitic crust that was already there, was very thick, and created new granite. Also some diorite too, but the great evidence of that out there are the Sierra Nevada mountains. Excuse me. The ocean crust, Pacific. I'm about to erupt. The Pacific Ocean crust plate subducted underneath California and created this massive granite batholith, huge blob of granite, and some diorite too, which is intermediate, that all up and down the west coast of North America. It was buried very, very deeply. And then many millions of years later, this would have been during the Nevadan orogeny, or mountain building event, which was about 170 million years ago. But then many millions of years later, let's say about 40 million years ago, rifting occurred again, which created our Great Basin and Range province. It was rifting because the Pacific plate fell away. It had been pushing up against the North America. That created many volcanoes, including the Rocky Mountains. But then it fell away, and all that compression pushing was released, and it reversed itself into tension, where it was pulling apart, which is rifting. And so Nevada didn't even exist back then until this pulling apart started. And the pulling apart caused the Great Basin to occur. And it also caused the land of California to break open in a giant rift. And one of the great blocks, torn pieces of crust, rotated up, and that brought the Sierra Nevada granite, mostly granite, some diorite, up near the surface, and then over other millions of years, the top layers were eroded off of it, creating the Sierra Nevada. So it's a long story just to say, when you have ocean crust that is subducted under huge land crust continent, you get a lot of granite there. Okay, and that's basically how things form. Of course, you also get diorite and andesite, like in South America. You get the simpler process. So what am I talking about? I don't know what I'm talking about.